Welcome to Biggest Spoilars, the destination for exclusive spoilers, latest updates.
General Hospital spoilers allude that Willow Kane may offer a Danny Morgan and Scout Quartermain deal. Will Willow decide that the siblings can only reunite if she gets Wiley Corinthos and Amelia Corinthos time? Willow obviously cares about Scout in her own way, but she's still inflicting damage on this poor girl's life. Scout formerly lost Sam McCall, so Willow was allowing about Scout losing another parent when she shot Drew Kane doubly. Now Willow has caused a massive, enervating stroke that Drew's doubtful to make a full recovery from. GH spoilers say that's going to turn Scout's world upside down, indeed if Willow thinks she's better off living with Alexis Davis. Speaking of Alexis, she was pleased when Willow agreed to let Scout move in with her grandma. Willow is trying to make effects harder than necessary on Scout, but she could still use the sprat as influence soon. When Alexis inquired about Danny hopefully being suitable to see his family, Willow decided to hold off on that until they knew further about Drew's prognostic. Still, there may have been another reason why Willow didn't incontinently give the green light on a Scout and Danny reunion. Maybe it's because Willow could use this situation to her advantage when it comes to seeing Wiley and Amelia. At some point, Willow might offer a trade, bone. That involves Danny getting to see Scout if she gets to see Amelia and Wiley. Maybe Willow will prompt Jason to get Michael Corinthos on board if he really wants to make Danny and Scout's dream come true. Also again, Willow may take the offer to Michael himself and count on him minding enough about Scout and Danny to make this deal be. Perhaps Willow will contend that if Michael does agree, he'll be the reason Danny and Scout are kept piecemeal. With Drew incapacitated, Willow will be in charge of everything and could help make sure Danny's restraining order is lifted. It may just be a matter of whether Michael is willing to strike a deal with manipulative Willow. General Hospital spoilers say Willow may be delaying Danny and Scout's reunion as part of a plan to see Wiley and Amelia, so bring you updates on any big news she might deliver. Brennan showed up at Jocelyn's apartment to tell her that director Ross Cullum of the WSB's European division was in Port Charles, and if the man realized that she was the youthful agent who'd done emotional work during the Five Poppies charge, he'd place her into some veritably dangerous situations. Brennan added that he's kept her off the radar, with her dossier in a locked black box in his office, and he didn't trust Cullum to cover her the way he has. Joss snapped back that, of course Cullum wouldn't cover her, because he was in love with her mama. Admitting that Carly was part of it, Brennan said he also didn't want to lose an agent he'd trained and informed her she was killed. Jocelyn angrily reminded her master that she was supposed to be gathering intel on Marco and Sidwell through Lucas, since she'd encouraged her uncle to move to Ladle Island on his orders. Jack replied that not only would Sidwell's butler, Pascal, fade her from the Five Poppies, but the WSB had a new asset on Ladle Island. Britt Westbourne. Shocked, Joss raged that Britt couldn't be trusted. Brennan reminded her that she had no say-so in the matter, but he trusted her and it made more sense for Britt to be on Ladle Island since her new exploration lab was at Windmere. Telling Joss that she was now classified as a slumberer, Brennan instructed her to distance herself from Lucas and go about her life as normal, staying sharp and unnoticeable until she heard else. Oh, brother. Assuming that Jason was ever responsible for Drew's stroke, Tracy offered to be his justification, but Jason assured her he'd nothing to do with it. While they awaited for Danny so they could tell him about Drew, Tracy hoped that the team could now spend time with Scout. Still, Jason was reluctant to break the restraining order, not wanting Drew to use that against them both when he woke up. However, Tracy smiled, if he wakes up. Upon learning about his uncle's condition, Danny was incontinently bothered about his little family. He wondered if they could ask Willow to lift the restraining order so he could support Scout. Jason wasn't comfortable approaching Willow because of the situation with Michael but transferred Danny to see Alexis for help spotting Cullum as she came down the stairs at Bobby's. Britt bothered that he was staying for her, but he rather saluted Lulu and Rocco when they entered the restaurant. After asking Rocco about the break heft at Professor Dalton's lab, Cullum wanted to know what they knew about the man's exposure, so Lulu explained that they'd figured Dalton took off to avoid facing charges for framing Rocco. Giving Lulu his card, Cullum told her to call him if they flashed back anything differently. Over by the counter, Britt informed Carly that she was moving out, complaining that the boarding house was a slum and Bobby would be rolling over in her grave to see it. After they traded cuts about their separate maters, their bickering turned to Jason, with Britt calling Carly hung up and pathetic when it came to him. As they were arguing, Cullum approached the counter to pay his tab and deliberately banged into Britt, which mildly freaked her out. Carly came around the counter, declaring their discussion done, but Britt seized her rival's arm and blustered that she was sick of Carly's moral authority act since she'd prevaricated and plotted her way through life, too. At that point, Carly revealed that she knew Britt was baiting her and demanded to know why she'd called her to the eatery just to pick a fight, insisting she wasn't trying to start a fight. Britt claimed that Jason was tired of Carly's drama, and he'd leave her behind if he could get over his sense of obligation toward her. Just as Carly wrangled back that she and Jason were tied together for life, the man in question arrived. When Jason asked if everything was okay between them, Britt strangled that Carly had reminded her why she wanted nothing to do with him. Fear room knowing how lonely it could be living in an empty house, Elizabeth visited Laura at her office to see how she was doing with Kevin and Ace in Ireland. Laura claimed that work had been keeping her busy, and Liz reminded her that she'd always be there if Laura demanded someone to entrust in or just wanted to be sad. Explaining how her musketeers had helped her through the lonely days after her boys left home, Liz offered to take Laura out eventually to keep her company. Promising to call her to set Commodity up, Laura expressed how lucky she was to have Elizabeth as a son-in-law, and Liz beamed that she was thankful for Laura, as well. After Liz left, Lulu stopped by. Laura was rattled to learn that she and Rocco had just had a meeting with WSB Director Ross Cullum about Henry Dalton. Laura covered her fear when Lulu revealed that the WSB sounded intent on chancing the missing. Professor Dante checked in with Nathan about the substantiation review, but West didn't have any updates. Just as Dante suffed that Chase was proof that anyone could have particular bias cloud their judgment, Chase arrived for a meeting with the acting manager. Moving to the interrogation room, Dante told Chase that internal affairs determined that indeed though he'd violated policy with his unsanctioned disquisition, there were no signs of corruption and no laws broken. While he wasn't being fired, Dante continued, Chase was disrated to command. He could take the operative test again in the future, but there had to be consequences for an operative who failed to follow procedure. Disrespected, Chase asked if he was being penalized as an operative or as someone who questioned Dante's authority. Declaring that Chase had to take responsibility for his conduct or it would breed resentment among the force, Dante told him to suppose about his decision. Frenetic that he'd to choose between ending his career or crawling back to a department that was chastising him for being right, Chase seized the brochure with his IA report and stormed off. Hitting into Nathan on his way out of the pen, Chase told Detective West to start looking for a new mate. Once filled in on Chase's reduction, Nathan pledged to step up since the PCPD was down an operative. Dante was happy to hear that since he'd need to lean on Detective West further than ever. Following his horrible meeting with Dante, Chase returned home and tossed Tracy's backgammon set off the table. As he was drawing up the mess, Tracy returned to the den, and he participated the news of his reduction. Despite her passions about his crusade to save Willow, a sympathetic Tracy told him that it was the department's loss. When Chase wondered what he'd do next, Tracy noted that he'd a lot to bandy with her granddaughter. Scout's Honor Willow went to Miller and Davis and tearfully told Alexis that Drew had a stroke. She wasn't sure who should be the one to tell Scout, but Alexis wanted to be the one to break the news to her granddaughter. Thanking Willow for being so considerate and careful when it came to Scout, Alexis stated that she felt it was stylish if Scout moved in with her. Admitting that indeed with the stylish prognostic, Drew's recovery would be delicate for Scout to watch, Willow agreed to let the girl stay with Alexis. As she gathered her fleece to leave, Alexis jumped out of her seat and asked if Scout could also see Danny. Willow revealed that she knew Scout had seen Danny the day after Christmas, but she hadn't told Drew and didn't plan to. Still, she was reluctant to let Danny see Scout, concerned about Drew's response once he was well enough to know about it. Willow agreed to readdress the matter laterally. After Willow left, Suzanne entered the office for an update, and Alexis happily participated the news that her granddaughter would be moving in with her. Latterly, Danny showed up and asked Alexis to talk to Willow about him seeing Scout. Revealing that she'd formerly discussed the situation with Willow, Alexis said that Drew's woman wanted to keep the restraining order in place until they knew further about his condition. But, she added, Willow doesn't feel the same way about Danny that Drew did, and there was a good chance he and Scout would be spending time together veritably soon. Take the good with the bad at the sanitarium. Nina asked Lucas for an update on Drew, and he participated that he was about to meet with the neurologist who oversaw the tests they'd run on the case. Lucas clarified that he could only bandy the results with Willow. Nina was leaving a frantic voicemail for Willow when Kai arrived at the sanitarium, demanding Mrs. Kane to authorize a statement on the Solon's condition for his media platoon. Nina offered to look at the statement, also participated her surprise that Kai was still working for Drew after he'd blackmailed Trina's parents. Kai commended that he was having a hard time separating the good Drew's done from the bad, and if the Solon hadn't had a stroke, he probably would have formally abnegated. He didn't know how Willow was suitable to make the distinction, he added, and Nina noted that she didn't either. Kai explained that he'd first met Drew because of the pediatric sports action Drew had started in honor of his late son, Oscar, and at the time, he allowed Drew was someone to respect. Revealing an analogous experience, Nina participated a story about being on the crusade trail with Drew and how authentically compassionate he'd been when speaking to a group of stagers. For a moment, it made her forget the horrible effects she knew about him. Nina suffed that she'd love to cut ties with Drew, but it wasn't easy with him being her son-in-law. She advised Kai not to make any big opinions yet, since a health extremity could occasionally change people, and the implicit good he could do in his position might outweigh Drew's bad. Black Widow. Once Willow arrived at the sanitarium, she told Nina that Scout would be staying with Alexis for the time being, also inked off on the media statement for Kai. Also, Lucas approached and revealed that Drew's test showed the stroke had affected his motor and language. When Kai asked for explanation, Willow tearfully slipped into nanny mode and rattled off that once he recaptured knowledge, Drew would need expansive speech, occupational, and physical remedy, and a full recovery was doubtful. As Willow blubbed hysterically on Elizabeth's shoulder, Nina suggested Kai finish the press releases, but when she turned back toward her son, Nina was confused by Willow's bloated response. Following her discussion with Jack, Jocelyn tracked down Lucas at the sanitarium and offered to play interceder between him and her mama. Indeed, though he missed his family, Lucas said, he didn't want to deal with Carly's station about Marco, especially since he got enough disapprobation from Pascal, the butler. He chortled that Windmere was butler-free at the moment since Pascal had gone back to France to handle some business. He also got a runner that he'd to do rounds, but invited Joss to hang out with him at Windmere with him once he was done working. Away, Rocco reported to GH for his first day of community service. Liz had him fill out levy paperwork, also gave him a brace of diminutives and showed him to the locker room. Spotting Willow in the sitting area with a far-out aspect, Nina sat down next to her son and reflected on how worried she'd been before. Reminding Willow that she'd only married Drew to get help prove her innocence and get her children back, she advised her son not to turn her sympathy into remission or worse, real love. I just want to make sure my hubby gets the treatment he deserves, a detached Willow declared. Is Willow having regrets about remedying Drew? Were you surprised that Britt picked a fight with Carly so she could part herself from Jason? Did Chase earn to be disrated for what he'd done to help Willow? Let us know what you allowed about the rearmost occasion of GH in the commentary below. The halls of General Hospital were heavy with whispers, hushed tones, and the invisible weight of decisions that could tilt the lives of many, most especially the young and innocent. Willow Tate Kane moved through the corridors with the quiet intensity of someone who had already decided that the rules of the world no longer applied to her. Her eyes, glassy yet steely, held the secrets of a plan that only she fully understood. To outsiders, she was simply grieving, weeping for Drew Kane's sudden and devastating stroke. But those closest to the unfolding tragedy could see something darker lurking beneath the surface, a calculation, a scheme, a subtle tightening of the strings she controlled. Scout Quartermain, the girl who had already suffered immeasurable loss, had been thrust into the eye of this storm. She had lost Sam McCall, the stability of one parental figure in a world that had shown her nothing but chaos, and now she faced the possibility of losing Drew Kane entirely. When Willow's hand had delivered the deadly shots, it wasn't just a physical blow, it was a psychic one, leaving Scout's world fractured, unsure, and trembling. The stroke that left Drew incapacitated wasn't just medical, it was a weapon of leverage, and Willow, in her own peculiar way, wielded it masterfully. Alexis Davis, always the protective grandmother, had watched the situation with a mixture of concern and cautious relief. Willow, for all her troubling actions, had agreed to allow Scout to move in with her. It wasn't kindness, strictly speaking, it was a strategic choice, but it provided a small island of stability amid the storm. Alexis held her granddaughter close, knowing that the girl needed sanctuary even if the person offering it could not be fully trusted. Willow's consideration extended only so far. When Alexis gently inquired about Danny Morgan, Scout's brother, and whether he could reunite with his sister, Willow hesitated. She explained carefully, almost as if trying to convince herself, that until Drew's condition was fully known, it was premature to allow such contact. But the truth was sharper, more sinister. Willow understood the value of leverage. She saw in this fragile web of relationships a way to shape her own desires. If she could control access to Scout, she could, in turn, influence the situations that mattered most to her, Wiley Corinthos and Amelia Corinthos. And in Port Charles, leverage was power. Jason Morgan, the man whose life was inexorably tied to the chaos around him, felt the pull of this manipulation like a weight on his chest. He knew Willow's methods, understood her reasoning, but that did little to calm the storm of concern for his family and friends. Danny, already traumatized by the sudden incapacitation of Drew, turned to Jason with the natural plea of a child desperate to see his sister. Jason's instinct screamed at him to protect Danny, but he also understood the precarious balance. Any misstep could be used against them if Drew regained consciousness. If he wakes up, Jason muttered with grim determination, we'll have to deal with the consequences. Danny's heart raced as he realized just how delicate the situation was. He wanted nothing more than to be near Scout, to reassure her, to protect her in the way an older brother always should. But he could not approach Willow directly. The very thought of her manipulating the scenario sent shivers down his spine. Jason, ever the protector, guided him to Alexis, trusting that some sense of reason might prevail through the grandmother's influence. Meanwhile, the storm of manipulation and intrigue was mirrored elsewhere in the city. Bobby's Diner, a familiar refuge, became the stage for yet another confrontation. Britt Westbourne, already exhausted by the constant moral and emotional battles surrounding Jason and Carly, navigated the cramped space with tension thick enough to choke on. Her eyes darted, muscles tense, heart pounding, as she spotted Ross Cullum. Though he had not come for her, the mere presence of the WSB's European director reminded her of the stakes, the invisible strings that threatened to pull the lives of those she cared for into danger. Cullum's questions were casual, almost disarming, as he spoke to Lulu and Rocco about Henry Dalton's disappearance. But every word was loaded with implication, a reminder that surveillance and manipulation were never far from Willow's or Cullum's world. Britt, frustrated and cornered by circumstance, took the opportunity to confront Carly. Their verbal sparring, already heated from past grievances, escalated into a sharp clash of accusations and moral superiority. Britt, with characteristic intensity, denounced Carly's obsession with Jason, framing her rival's actions as manipulative and selfish. Carly, quick to defend herself, accused Britt of provoking conflict deliberately. And as the words flew, Jason arrived, the calm in the eye of this interpersonal storm. Britt's sneer and Carly's exasperation collided with his silent authority, and the tension hung in the air like the thread of lightning. In the midst of this, the stakes of the outside world pressed in. The looming shadow of Willow's schemes, Drew's stroke, and the potential custody and leverage surrounding Scout and Danny painted every personal conflict with an urgency far beyond petty rivalries. At home, the quiet offered no reprieve. Elizabeth Spencer arrived at Laura's office, bringing with her the warmth of concern, the comfort of family. Laura, preoccupied with work and the absence of Kevin and Ace, appreciated Elizabeth's visit. The two shared a quiet conversation, an interlude of genuine connection amidst a sea of chaos. Elizabeth reminded Laura of the value of companionship, of leaning on those who care when loneliness threatened to overwhelm. In a world rife with danger and deception, moments like these were rare, fleeting oases of emotional clarity. Elsewhere, the internal politics of the Port Charles Police Department raged like an undercurrent beneath daily life. Chase's recent demotion, a result of unsanctioned investigation yet performed with moral integrity, left him bitter and questioning the system he had sworn to uphold. Internal affairs had cleared him of corruption, yet the demotion to patrol was a tangible reminder that challenging authority carried consequences. His frustration boiled over, tossing Tracy's backgammon set in a symbolic gesture of anger and defiance. Danny, too, was indirectly affected by these ripples, as law enforcement's limitations and rules impacted the ability to navigate the delicate situation with Willow and Scout. The hospital, ever a nexus of life and death drama, became the epicenter of Willow's manipulation. Willow, teetering between genuine grief and calculated strategy, tearfully informed Alexis of Drew's devastating stroke. The prognosis was grim, motor function and language centers had been severely affected, with full recovery unlikely. Therapy, patience, and monumental care would be required. Alexis, always the protective grandmother, expressed gratitude for Willow's willingness to let Scout stay with her, knowing full well the delicate balance between compassion and manipulation that her daughter-in-law wielded. Willow's tears, genuine in appearance, masked the strategic advantage she retained: control over access, leverage over family, and the ability to negotiate outcomes in her favor. Danny's desire to see Scout was immediate and pressing. Yet Willow, ever cautious, delayed the reunion, using Drew's incapacitation and potential recovery as a reason to postpone contact. In doing so, she subtly signaled that the power to unite the siblings rested with her alone. It was leverage of the highest order, a demonstration of influence that extended far beyond mere guardianship. At the same time, Windmere served as a different theater of tension. Lucas, Jocelyn, and Ava navigated the subtleties of alliance, trust, and conflict within the grand estate. Jocelyn, recently deactivated as a WSB agent, was reminded by Brennan of the risks inherent in exposure. Britt, now installed at Windmere with her research lab, represented a volatile variable. The proximity of so many interconnected players, some unaware, some all too aware, created a pressure cooker environment. One misstep, one whispered secret, could ignite consequences that rippled outward, affecting not only missions and intelligence but the lives of the innocent. Back at General Hospital, Nina and Kai wrestled with the duality of Drew Kane's character. His philanthropy and integrity, the good he had done through campaigns and outreach, clashed with the chaos and harm his current condition threatened to propagate. It was a moral puzzle, how to weigh potential good against undeniable damage. For Willow, the equation was simpler. The good did not absolve the harm. And in her mind, the harm was now a tool, a mechanism to shape outcomes according to her desires, from Scout and Danny's reunion to her own interactions with Wiley and Amelia. By the day's end, the threads of drama, danger, and manipulation coalesced into a complex tapestry of power and vulnerability. Willow's control over Scout and Danny's interactions, Drew's incapacitation, Jason's vigilance, Alexis' protective influence, and the constant undercurrent of WSB intrigue all interwove to create a narrative dense with tension. Choices carried consequences, encouragement came laced with threats, and every act of care contained the potential for coercion. The city of Port Charles, with its shifting alliances and delicate balances, braced itself for the next move. Willow's hand hovered over the lives of those she nominally cared about, ready to tip the scales in her favor. Jason, Danny, Alexis, and all those caught in the crossfire could only anticipate her next decision, knowing full well that in this game, power was absolute, and mercy was rare. Scout's future, Danny's hopes, Drew's life, and the fragile threads of family were all suspended in a delicate balance. Willow Tate Kane, ever calculating, ever watchful, held the key. The question remained, would she act as protector, manipulator, or both? And when the dust settled, who would emerge whole, and who would be left reeling from the consequences of choices made in desperation, grief, and ambition? Because in Port Charles, the only certainty is that every act of kindness carries the potential for betrayal, and every threat may hide a twisted form of care.